and welcome to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news or social media, TV, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today, I have Rick Soetebier, and we're going to talk about being in the wrong relationship. Hi, Rick. How are you?
Great, Sophie. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, I am a dating and relationship coach, and I reside in the central part of the United States. The best location I can give you is Kansas City, Missouri, which is almost dead center in the middle of the United States. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing my coaching for about almost 8 years now. And I co-authored a book on dating about 5 or 6 years ago called Dating Backward, a practical guide to dating and finding your soulmate. And that all came about as a result of, now it's almost 40 years of study of self and relationship improvement and a 25-year relationship with my ex-wife that obviously that didn't work. Yeah. So it was a compilation of things, or a combination of things that all came together at one time, and we wrote the book, and it's based on just a lot of my learnings, a lot of my experience, and a lot of the experiences of others, as a matter of fact. So,
but you see, this is the thing. Sometimes you have to go through these things that actually don't work to be able to get to the thing that will work.
Absolutely. It's sadly, experience is one of the best teachers.
So to you, what's the difference between the right relationship and the wrong relationship?
Well, in the book, I lay out the premise that there are several key factors in any extraordinary relationship. You have to develop an intellectual connection, a spiritual connection, an emotional connection, and a physical connection. Those are the four cornerstones or the four building blocks of all great relationships. Without any one of those, your relationship becomes unstable. Mm-hmm. An intellectual connection is being able to talk to each other, sharing common interests, common values. A spiritual interest. Now, and while I'm a Christian, I'm not telling you that you have to have Christian beliefs. You need to have similar beliefs. If you're a Muslim, be with a Muslim. If you're a Catholic, be with a Catholic. If you're Jewish, be with another Jew. Or if you're not agnostic, atheist, be with an atheist. And you need to have those similar spiritual values. Emotions, they take a little, the emotional connection, that takes a little bit of time to develop. You've got to get to know each other, and you have to get past the infatuation stage. Which is, can last up to 2 years. And that's when the blinders come off and you say, you look at the relationship and holy cow, what have I done? So, and then the physical connection, there's two parts to that. It's the
original chemistry,
visual.
You need to be attracted.
You want to have that visual attraction to each other. And then there's the sexual intimacy, and I really don't promote sexual intimacy until ideally after marriage. But statistics show that 80% of couples are going to be in bed by the eighth date. So while I promote waiting until marriage, I know that most of us don't follow that rule, or statistically we don't. Then there's a couple of Go ahead.
The point of it is more, don't just jump into bed, because it's not something that, I know for some people it's just sex, and that's fair enough. But if you're trying to build a good relationship, if you can't wait literally a couple of weeks or whatever, there's an issue straight away, isn't there?
Well, absolutely. And I think what most people don't realize is that when you jump into bed too quickly, or when you introduce sex into the relationship too quickly, you stop learning about each other. You stop developing a deeper connection. You stop developing an intellectual connection. You may develop a little bit of emotional connection at a very high level, but it's not going to be a deep, intimate connection.
Sorry, I interrupt, but I recall a workmate years ago who it was supposed to be a one-night stand with this woman. The upshot of it is that they're now married, and still married years down the road. So, something that was never supposed to go past the next morning actually did.
Well, and there's going to be exceptions to every rule. and those are the great stories we like to tell, or that we hear of from time to time. But overall, and studies back this up, and so ideally you want to hold off on the sex as long as possible. I know I have friends and people that I've coached that have set a 90-day window, or 120-day, or a 6-month window that they're not going to sleep with their partner for 6 months, and that's all well and good. The longer studies show that the longer you spend getting to know each other, the stronger your relationship becomes. Then there's a couple of other aspects of relationships. I firmly believe that you should be speaking similar love languages. And I find that important because in the book, the 5 love languages, I'm assuming you're familiar with that.
I am, but do mention what they are, because some people may not be.
Okay, very good. The 5 love languages, and it's a book written by, what's his name?
Gary Chapman. That's him.
And the 5 love languages are physical touch, acts of service, words of affirmation, quality time, and gifts. Those are the 5 primary, as he describes it, the 5 primary love languages. And I find it very accurate. When you read the book, you take a little quiz at the end, and kind of gives you an idea of what your primary love languages are. And I'll use me for an example. My primary love languages are physical touch and acts of service. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to gifts, can I give gifts? Yes. But when it comes to special events, anniversaries, holidays, Valentine's Day is coming up, and it's like, oh, just kill me. It just tell me what you want. I struggle giving gifts. Now if I'm walking down the street and I see something that reminds me of Sophie, I'm going to, I can do that.
Yeah.
But for a special event, a birthday, holidays, whatever, it's sheer torture. And I can remember back to being a young boy walking down the street in my hometown, trying to figure out what to get my mother for Christmas. And it was like, oh, Mom, just please tell me what you want. So,
and that's it. And for some people, that's really important, but to them, you should know.
Yes, don't do that to anyone. We're not mind readers. It's just, now there are some people that are really good at giving gifts. That's not me.
Yeah, you're not one of them.
Yeah, exactly. So don't expect that from me. And so that's one of the, that's part of the reason I suggest that you speak similar love languages, because you just naturally connect and you can communicate in a much deeper level.
Well,
because you're
acknowledge what yours are, and that this person's may be different, so that you don't feel unloved.
Well, and that's a huge point right there, Sophie, because if you're not speaking the same love languages, you can feel very unloved. Even if you know what your partner's love language is, you can still feel unloved because you're not being loved the way you need to be. You know, if your love language is gifts and words of affirmation, and physical touch is right way down on your list, I'm going to feel unloved because I like holding hands, I like snuggling, I like, you know, so I find it at least from working with my clients, I find that it's very important to include that in the mix to
To choose the
take as
right
many.
person.
Yeah, what I try to do is try to take as many of the roadblocks out of a relationship as
Mm.
possible. And when you're speaking similar love languages, you remove a couple of roadblocks or hurdles that can make or that can create a significant amount of tension, of unhappiness, because we're not being loved the way we need to be loved.
So,
So
what happens if we find ourselves in potentially the wrong relationship?
well, that I'm a very cut and dried person when it comes to that. If I'm finding, you know, I recommend to my clients, I have my own personal must-have list and my own personal deal breaker list. You know, and as I'm dating, as I'm talking to you, um, I'm evaluating whether you have everything on my list or not, or if I see any deal breakers. And if I see any deal breakers or any red flags that come up, I'm out.
And
Because
what happens if the reason why I say this is because this is an example that I am watching as we speak. A friend
uh-huh.
of mine met someone years ago, married the chap years ago. They had a couple of kids together.
Hmm.
And now the dynamic is changing completely. First of all, where she wasn't religious, now she is. Her job has completely changed. There's a bit of an issue, shall we say, with one of the kids. Uh, and I'm watching this from afar, thinking, hello, this is potentially not going in the right direction. So, what do you do then? Because we do change and evolve and whatever.
We do, and that's one of those sticky situations. At least from my perspective, I never like to promote divorce.
No,
You know, if there are no other alternatives,
you need to work
great.
at it first,
Yeah,
without a shadow of a doubt.
you've got to, you've made a commitment to a relationship in that particular situation. And if what I find is, typically when you're with the right person, and I'll come back to this in a second, when you're with the right person, you're generally going to be evolving in the same direction. You may not be following exactly the same path, but you're going to be moving in the same general direction. And that becomes in you know, when I talked about a spiritual connection, or being with someone that you have a spiritual connection with. Apparently they weren't religious when they got together, and that's also a problem. You know, if you're agnostic, or if you're an atheist, that's not to say that one of you isn't going to change, and that's going to throw a dynamic into that, which is what's happening in
Yeah.
in your friend's marriage. I Being a coach, I'm not a counselor or a therapist, and I would highly encourage them to get some therapy or go to a counselor and start working on the issues, being able or relearning to communicate with each other in a way that is not antagonistic towards each other. That Because when we run into problems in the relationship, there's a lot of strains on the relationship. We can forget our good communication skills, and we can snap
Mm.
And just we snap at our partner. And even in more casual relationships, I catch myself from time to time if I'm under stress or they say something that just ticks me off. I'll have to go back and apologize and say, listen, this is what you said, this is what I heard. And that can often be a stumbling block, because when somebody says something to us, we understand the words, but we hear the meaning in a different term than what they meant.
Yeah. And I think that there's also, as you're talking, and I'm thinking, obviously, I think the secondary issue, there's such a word, or such a thing, is that it's all well and good when people meet when they're young. And obviously, when you go past 40, for instance, you get a different insight. You've had a different life experience. So your choices are going to be very different after 40 than they are at 20, especially in picking a partner.
Oh, absolutely. Your life experiences, good and bad, make you who you are. And by the time you get to 40, 50, 60, you become a little more set in your ways, and you become hopefully a little more clear about what you want in a relationship, what's important to you and what's not. And it's so important to recognize what's not important to you as much as it is to understand what is important to you.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, not all relationships work. And I don't just mean marriage, I mean relationships full stop here.
Right.
And I think, whilst I personally believe it's right to nurture it and try to work at it as much as you can, when it becomes bad for both people and toxic in a way, because neither of them are happy anymore, then I think that, unfortunately, some people are so scared of leaving and being on their own that they stay, and they put up with something that's really actually the worst life ever.
Exactly. And that's and I try to preempt so much of that by teaching my clients how to recognize problems early on. Because by the time you get a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, and in writing my book, I interviewed a lot of people, and especially women. And I just had this conversation about a week ago on my Facebook live, my Monday Mastery, and we talked about, typically women go to they give everything to a relationship, from a feeling that they have to, most women feel they have to give their all to make sure this relationship works, in spite of the fact that they see problems. And it may not be, it may not be necessarily problems that of violence or antagonism or whatever it might be. It just might be differences. Yeah, it's just there's something not right, and you're trying to fix something that's broken. And
that's not their fault, nor the other person's fault.
Right.
It's just they're not quite well matched.
And that's exactly right. And when you recognize that it's not a good fit, that's when I say it's time to leave. Don't develop a lot of emotional connection to somebody when you recognize that this isn't a good fit. It doesn't make either one of you a bad person. It just means that you're not right for each other.
But you see, this is the thing. A lot of people feel that there's a good one and a bad one, and that someone's going to get judged. Often the person who leaves, where actually they might be doing everyone a favor.
Exactly. And when you recognize when you recognize that it's not the right relationship for you, and it could be for any number of just even simple reasons. You might not like the way they hang their clothes. If it's a deal breaker, then or if you see red flags or it's not a comfortable relationship, it's time to walk away. And there's nothing wrong with having an adult conversation. And that's what I tell my clients is have the adult conversation. Don't be afraid. One of you has to be an adult and say, no, this isn't working. And again, it's not because either one of you are a bad person. It's just that it's not a good fit. And when you explain it that way, generally the breakup or the ending of the relationship, it goes fairly well. I mean, it's never comfortable being broken up with. I've had women break up with me and it's like, oh, that didn't feel good.
Mm.
And
this is the thing. People don't want to have that conversation because they're scared that it could be the end. But what they don't realize is that by not having one conversation, another conversation, it's ending anyway. So you might as well have that first conversation and try and sort it before it's too late.
Exactly. And then and the longer you stay in that situation, the harder it is to leave. Because you start developing these emotions, and like you said earlier, you're afraid to leave because you might you tell yourself these stories. Well, I might not find anyone better. Well, he's okay. He treats me okay most of the time. Well, it shouldn't be most of the time. It should be all of the time.
And sometimes there's other things as well. I mean, I was with someone years ago, and what stopped me for a long time to actually split up from him was his family, because I really got on with them and I liked being part of his family.
Sure.
Didn't like him much, but I like the family.
Yeah, and there are those connections that you develop with his friends, with his family, and those connections are hard to lose also.
Yeah,
and that
part of it.
Yeah, it's all part of the package. It's all part of, but it's all part of having the adult conversation and being an adult and making the right decision for you. Just because part of this situation feels really good and really comfortable, it's not worth dealing with the pile of garbage or the pile of crap over
That's
here.
fair. Yeah.
And what you'll find is and what your listeners should find is that when you're with the right person, most of those problems go away. And I'm not saying you're going to have a perfect relationship. No relationship is perfect.
You're always going to have some niggly bits. No one's, it's about being perfect for you, including the quirks.
Exactly. And a lady friend of mine and I were talking about this very thing a couple of weeks ago. We get, as we age, we get set in our ways, and a lot of times it's you question whether there's somebody that you can open up enough to let somebody in. Well, it may be somebody that the person that you let in is set in their ways, which are very similar to your ways. You're kind of complementary in those things, so and I believe that we all have more than one soulmate or extraordinary relationship. I know people get on to me, Rick, I don't believe in soulmates. I do. But in my book, we use the term soulmate and extraordinary relationship interchangeably. And from my studies, it appears that less than 15% of all relationships are extraordinary relationships.
And I think you've got to know the limits. And what I mean by that, there's one relationship that I would class as extraordinary that I've had in the past. Only romantically it never worked. But he's now my best friend.
Yeah.
And has been for 15 years.
Sure.
But it just never worked as a romantic relationship. But people don't go past that. It's just like, no, right, it doesn't work out. So let's park him or her and move on. Where actually you could have developed something different with somebody. It's just that it didn't work romantically.
Right. And I would classify that as a good relationship. but not extraordinary. Extraordinary is going to encompass everything. You know, you're going to develop an intellectual, spiritual, emotional, and physical connection. They're going to have all of your must-haves and none of your deal breakers. You're going to speak similar love languages, at least in my opinion. And there are some people that can speak fluently or reasonably fluently between all 5 love languages. It's not me. Yeah. So, and that's not most of us. So, and then you throw in the factor of chemistry. You know, there has to be that chemistry, that feeling that it just kind of permeates the entire relationship. It's kind of the glue that holds everything together. It's the feeling, the chemistry, and the chemistry. And I want to make this crystal clear to your listeners that it's not the butterflies, it's not the tingly toes, it's not the weak knees. The chemistry is what happens after all of that disappears. The butterflies, the weak knees, the tingling toes, the giddiness, that's all infatuation. And that can last, depending on how much you've dated, anywhere from a couple of months to a couple of years. And that's sadly when the blinders come off and you start recognizing, oh, this was a mistake.
But this is the thing as well. At that stage, a lot of the time, not only do you present your best self, which is normal because you're trained to say yourself, but you also see what you want to see.
Exactly. And where I learned that very lesson is when I started evaluating my marriage. You know, when I was with my ex-wife, when I go back to the first 30 days that I dated her, I started to see red flags, and I ignored the red flags, as most of us do, because of infatuation, and raging hormones tend to blind us to some of the realities of the relationship. And now, I'm not saying that we didn't have some good times. I'm not saying that she was a terrible woman. You know, it just got to a point where we couldn't communicate, and as much as we tried, it didn't work. You know, and we both, like your friend, my ex and I evolved in different directions, and I totally believe that when you're with your soulmate or in an extraordinary relationship, you will evolve in similar directions. And if you do deviate from each other, you're going to be each other's cheerleader, or you're going to be their support system in helping them accomplish what they want to do, and vice versa. You know, I'm going to help you accomplish what you want, and you're going to help me accomplish what I want. And even if it takes us on diverging paths, we're going to be supportive of each other. So
I genuinely wonder whether age has something to do with that, because I remember before I did this, I did events for single people, and in my mind, I was really targeting it to the over 40s, really, because it's more difficult to meet someone than when you're at university, let's say, for argument's sake.
Right.
But also, because this is right at the beginning, I'd not made that clear, I suppose, in my marketing or whatever, and there was some younger people turn up. And these people's expectations, what they were looking for, these 2 young girls, I recall, what they were looking for the wedding photos and the gene pool. There's no other way of putting it. And I do think that sometimes with age, we make very different decisions. And I wonder how we could kind of foolproof that for the younger ones.
Oh, that's a great question, and I struggle.
Just my observation is more than a question, to be fair, but it's really something I've seen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, I know there's a couple of friends in my life that have been high school sweethearts, and you know, 40 some years, almost 50 years later, they're still married, they're still happy.
Yeah.
I even look at my daughter and her husband. They were high school sweethearts from like 14 or 15 years old, and they're happily married now, and have been for 13 or 14 years. There are those situations that you find extraordinary early. But I think, as in general, as a young person, you don't know what the world is all about. You don't know what's going to, you have
You don't
roles, I guess.
necessarily look at live vision because you don't know what retirement looks like if you're 20. If you ask any 20-year-old in the street, what are you going to do when you retire? I don't think there's going to be many people that know the answer to that.
They get what we call a deer in the headlights look. Just to look like.
What are you talking about? Huh? But even and I don't know how we get to that stage, but even they'd have a better chance to pick the right person at the right time, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know how you cross that bridge.
No idea.
Idea. I think from a practical standpoint, the only thing you can do is teach fundamentals. And for me, the fundamentals are the 4 cornerstones of great relationships: knowing, making your must-have and deal breaker lists, and those types of things, and giving, and that information works for everyone. Just understanding, if I can give my best advice to young people, it's to look for the 4 cornerstones. Be able to, find someone that you can talk with that shares similar values. And that's as important as anything, because that's all part of communication. Learn how to talk to each other and respect each other. And that those things transcend all age groups.
Yeah, completely. I think it's, as you were talking, I was just thinking of someone. I'd be careful. I mean, not that the person will be listening to this anyway. He's 21 or 22, I think, and he was seeing this, on paper, Instagram perfect girl. And he said from the start, that I'm never going to get married to her. She's not wife material. So to him, she wasn't wife material. Anyway, so that finished because she started saying, it'd been a year and a bit. She started talking about marriage and potentially having kids, and he was like, no. So not her. So he finished it because it's better for everyone like that. And anyway, he's met someone else who he actually met at school. And she's also Instagram perfect, but she can cook. Even things that he doesn't like, and he eats it, right? It's actually very sweet to watch from an outsider point of view. But what I found amazing is how he's now actively looking for what he classes as wife material and a long-term partner. And he's got that list. It's not that I've discussed it with him or he's not read books or anything on it. But in his head, he was like, right, okay, now that I'm 22 or whatever it is, I need to really start looking, and this is what I want in a life partner. And I was like, this is quite unbelievable,
Well, but I from the sounds of it, he's on the right track. Unfortunately, and even in the over 40 group, so many of us tend to gravitate to an average relationship just to have someone in our lives. We don't want to spend time alone. We don't want to be alone. We're afraid of growing old alone, and the older we get, the stronger that desire is to not grow old alone. So
which actually is quite sad, because it's far better to be on your own than being, let's go back to the beginning here, in the wrong relationship.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so quick at ending wrong relationships, because I know we only have a finite time on this earth. And I've said many times, I'm in my early 60s right now, so I have maybe 25 years left. And I would rather spend the next 20 years looking for extraordinary and 5 years in that extraordinary relationship than the next 25 years in mediocre and something that's unfulfilling and in a relationship that's unfulfilling and unsatisfying.
Yeah.
You know, to me, to me, that's a no-brainer. But I know there are some people out there that they just want to be there, and they will give 100%. They'll find the first one-sided relationship, and I define one-sided relationship as you putting all the effort in and them putting almost nothing in.
Yeah.
You're doing everything to make the relationship work, and that puts them in the position of power. Because they control the relationship. You're jumping through all the hoops to make it work, and they're just saying, no, this isn't working for me. You need to do this, and you're going to do it.
Yeah.
So they're very, very unhealthy.
Completely. Well, Rick, thank you so much. We're getting towards the end of our time together. So before we go, what would be your last pearl of wisdom?
Be patient.
Okay.
Be patient, and that's where most people.
I was just about to say that is the one thing people don't want to be.
I know. It's like the prayer, Lord, give me patience and give it to me now.
Yeah, that's it.
and what I've found is, I've recently started entered into a relationship. I've been looking for 10 years, and and because I've waited. And I've been patient, and I've dated a lot over the last 10 years. I found a woman that I believe right now, we've only been dating for, I don't know, 2.5 months, but it has all the earmarks of an extraordinary relationship. It doesn't mean we haven't had our problems, and issues, but it's
got what you're looking for. It's got the right characteristics for vision, everything else.
Exactly. But and the point of this is be patient. You don't know when that right person is going to walk into your life. I had a conversation several years ago with a woman that said, I don't think there's anyone out there for me. And we shared, well, God is working on you. She was recently divorced. He said, there are lessons that you need to learn. There are things that you need to heal from. And God's doing the same work on somebody else, on somebody for you. And lo and behold, a couple of years later, she found the man of her dreams, and he wasn't that far away. And sometimes it's just the healing process after the end of a relationship or a long marriage, and the grieving process that we have to go through. You just have to be patient. Go through it. Timing,
definitely.
Exactly. And timing is a great example, because the woman I'm dating now, I met her 9 years ago, and it wasn't, and we drove by. It didn't fit. Neither of us were in the right mindset at the time, and now things have changed for both of us, and it's a great fit. So and again, it goes to patience. I never expected to end up in a relationship with her, but lo and behold, here we are.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Rick, thank you so much for that. And for everybody else, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, but more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.